right. We will go ahead and you ready? All right, we're going to get started. It is warm, but this is definitely necessary and needed. I want to make sure everybody knows there is water over there in that cooler. Please help yourself to water. We don't want anybody getting overheated. And if you don't think you need it, the nurse is saying you need it. So get it. All right, good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining us here today. I am proud to be standing alongside colleagues and advocates as we reintroduce the People's Response Act, groundbreaking legislation that embraces an affirmative approach to public safety that will save lives. I want to thank my co-leads, Representatives Pramila Jayapal, Summer Lee, Morgan McGarvey, Ayanna Presley, and Jan Shakowski, who are all very fiercely dedicated advocates for genuine community safety. I also want to thank all the organizations who have endorsed this legislation and the advocates who are here today in support of it. These include, but are not limited to, Movement for Black Lives, Civil Rights Corps, March for Our Lives, Color of Change, Partners in Health, Moms Rising, Newtown Action Alliance, Human Rights Watch, and so many more. The People's Response Act would create a public safety division within the Department of Health and Human Services. It will launch a federal first responders unit, a unit that is culturally competent, to support states and local governments with emergency crises, promote health-based and non-carceral responses at all levels of government, and provide over $13 billion to fund programs and workers that are proven to save lives. Our work is nothing. As a nurse, we want to make sure that people that know how to do the work, who are skilled to do the work, are the ones doing the work. So what do these interventions actually look like at the ground level? They look like community health workers and unarmed first responder agencies, 911 dispatchers for diverting calls to first responders, violence and abuse interruption and prevention programs. It looks like safe passage to school programs and harm reduction based treatment for mental health and substance use, pollution reduction, nutrition access, youth and mentorship programs, and targeted services to help victims, witnesses, and survivors. And that's just a few of them. That's what true community safety looks like. We cannot achieve safety by criminalizing mental health or criminalizing substance use and homelessness. We cannot achieve safety by destroying lives instead of saving them. And we cannot achieve safety until we abandon the failed approach of the past and embrace the evidence-based public health approach that we all know will reduce violence and increase public safety. And this is not something that we think could happen. This is something we know. There is data. It's always been about investing in the health and well-being of our communities. These are not abstract ideas. This is my lived experience. I am the first activist from the movement to save Black lives to serve here in Congress. It's a movement that was born out of the Ferguson uprising in response to the murder of Michael Brown and has carried through the nationwide protests in response to the murders of George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, and so many more. And we honor Uncle Bobby, who's back here, and Auntie, who have been standing out there with us since came to Ferguson and have been out there with us as they also are fighting for justice. Well, not justice because he's not here, but accountability for Oscar Grant. It's a movement. It's a movement that demands. Stop this. Stop this. Take your time. We're standing here right now. Yeah. This movement demands transformative changes, because had this change happened, he would be with us and so many others. Changes to public safety, an end to police brutality, and the redirection of public investment into historically excluded Black and brown communities instead of our failed status quo policing and incarceration practices. It's a movement that shaped every line of this legislation, and the People's Response Act is an ode to it. It's an ode to the thousands of people who've died at the hands of police and to the thousands of deaths and abuses we can prevent if Congress acts. This legislation that is one piece of a larger effort that is needed to end police brutality once and for all. And this bill is activism in legislative form. I came to Washington to bring this movement inside the Capitol. And it's our partnership with movement advocates that led to the creation of the People's Response Act. So as we together reintroduce the PRA in the 118th Congress, this is no longer just a bill. This is a movement in action. I am excited to see the energy around this movement from the legislation that my colleagues are introducing that embody the same principles to the community safety agenda led by our advocacy partners. I'm honored to work alongside these extraordinary lawmakers and advocates in this struggle. Know that your Congresswoman loves you, and I will not stop fighting until we achieve genuine community safety. How do we know it's genuine, and how do we know it's community and that it's actually safety? Because we are doing it from the heart, and it actually saves lives. Thank you, and I will turn it over now to my sister in service, the esteemed representative from Boston, Massachusetts, Congresswoman Ayanna Pressley. Thank you.
You know, first just a word about this extraordinary politivist, lawmaker and activist. I've said it often that there is no deficit of resource in this country, but there is a deficit of empathy. And I'm so glad that you shed those tears. You were unapologetic in every way, and I thank you for leading with empathy and compassion in the work of liberation. Good afternoon, movement family. It's good to be in community with you once again. I really do seek to govern in a way that is cooperative, and have long believed that the people closest to the pain should be the closest to the power, driving and informing the policy making. You all have certainly been closest to the pain. And in this People's Response Act, you have been closest to the power and informing the crafting of this legislation. It is because of your close partnership and all of the advocates here today that this legislation was made possible. It's great to be with my fellow agitators and organizers and justice seekers. The People's Response Act is only possible because of your sweat equity, bless you, because of your labor of love, because of your trauma. I really do look forward to a day where you can come to the People's House and not have to weaponize your trauma in order to compel action from your government. But until that day arises, I'm grateful that you continue to do it. This People's Response Act is only possible because of your sweat equity, because of your laboring in love, because of your trauma, because of your unrelenting dedication to bold, transformative change that centers the humanity and the dignity of all people. This bill is a legislative embodiment of the need to prioritize healing, equity, and justice in our lawmaking. For too long, America's flawed approach to public safety has centered criminalization, surveillance, incarceration, rather than care, justice, and healing. That must change. Remember that so-called racial reckoning at the height of some of our most high-profile instances of police brutality and murder, that people said we were in the midst of a racial reckoning? I'm still waiting. We may have had an awakening, But the reckoning has not yet taken place because we have not advanced budgetary or policy solutions that are commiserate to the hurt and harm that has been caused. So if you are serious about a racial reckoning, then we have to legislate equity, healing, and justice. Our bill, which we are proud to reintroduce today in the 118th Congress, would replace the unjust and flawed status quo of criminalization with humane and trauma-informed public health approach that recognizes that everyone deserves compassion and care. It would direct the federal government to take a health-centered approach to public safety and invest in the community-based responses that our communities have been calling on for generations, and we know what will truly keep us safe. In this moment, we have to demonstrate the political courage to push for community-based solutions instead of falling back on the failed tactics of treating trauma with more trauma. For too long, policing and incarceration have destabilized families, ravaged our communities, robbing us of countless black and brown lives. In the words of Angela Y. Davis, prisons do not disappear social problems. They disappear people. It is time we learn that lesson. It is time we have a federal government that sees and treats public safety as the public health issue that it is. And it is time we make serious investments in solutions that are rooted in community and care. This fight, like everyone up here, is deeply personal to me. Growing up, my father, Martin, was absent for most of my formative years because his addiction was criminalized. And rather than my father being met with culturally competent, compassionate, on-demand treatment, my father was incarcerated because his addiction was criminalized. And for many years, I carried shame and stigma and the trauma of the destabilization of his absence. It took us decades upon his reentry to heal. A man that for so many years I referred to only as Martin. I'm proud that today I call him Dad. And my father, that black man, went on to attain 2 advanced degrees while incarcerated, came out, was a professor of journalism, and is today a published author. By criminalizing substance use, mental health, poverty, we're missing out on the brilliance and innovation and the contributions of so many. We have a moral obligation to put an end to the generations of policy violence that is literally killing our people. As our nation continues to recover from the pandemic, we cannot simply return to the status quo because the status quo was never good enough in the first place. It's time we enact bold, transformative legislation like the People's Response Act to create a safer and more just society.
Thank you.
Is more in there? Okay. All right. And so now we'll hear from Celeste Faison. I just want to make sure that's the right name. I know it's not you. Okay. Celeste Faison, Director of Policy and Campaigns at Movement for Black Lives.
Thank you, Congresswoman Cori Bush and Congresswoman Ayanna Presley, and to all the other sponsors. My name is Celeste Faison, and I'm the Co-Executive Director of Movement for Black Lives. And we just want to start by saying it is time. Can I hear y'all say it is time?
It is time.
Can I hear y'all say it is time?
It is time.
We've marched in the streets, y'all, from Ferguson to Boston to Minneapolis, Chicago, with Uncle Bobby and Auntie Beatrice in Oakland, from Tennessee to Florida. And I say, it is time. Is it time?
It is time.
We need our government to act on our behalf, to invest in programs and policies that keep our most vulnerable folks in our community, particularly black and brown folks, and our trans sisters and brothers safe. Is it time, y'all?
It is time.
It is time for us to continue to uprise when we need to be in the streets, but that needs to be met by action from our government, from our Congress. We need to see real investment, and we are so grateful to Congressman Bush for forwarding this initiative, which is the PRA, because what is it? It is time, y'all. And so we want to thank you so much for taking on the leadership to make this happen. Too often, the misguided approach that we've had in place to respond to trauma has created indeed more trauma. And as a consequence of that, it has resulted in the loss of many Black lives. And we're tired of dying in the streets. Are we tired of dying in the streets, y'all?
Yes.
And we deserve to be treated with dignity and respect. And what that looks like is a real investment in the PRA and moving this forward. And not only are we in support of this bill, but we will mobilize all around the country this summer and in 2024 to make sure that this is a priority issue around the country. Because our members, all 170 of them of Movement Black Lives, have also said it is time. It's time, y'all.
It's time.
So we're going to take to the streets. We're going to take to the wall, to the halls of Congress. We're going to take it to the presidential elections. And we're going to invest in our down ballot candidates as well, because we know that it's time for change. And with the leadership of this body, the sponsors of this bill, we know that it's possible. Thank you.
Thank you.
And next we will have Congressman Morgan McGarvey of Kentucky.
Good afternoon, everybody. Good afternoon. Thank you so much. I am honored today to join Congresswoman Cori Bush. Done an amazing job, and all of my colleagues in introducing the People's Response Act. There is something we can all agree on. We want our communities to be safe. Something we agree on. We want our communities to be safe. And so we're not making this up. We know from wanting safe communities and years of research and data, we can't incarcerate our way out of mental health and substance abuse crises. We can't incarcerate ourselves out of poverty. We can and should create additional resources to save lives and make sure our communities are protected and safe, which is exactly what the People's Response Act will do. Again, this is something we know. We know because we've watched it play out in our country, in our communities, and other places around the world, years of data and best practices, that keeping our communities safe means supporting responsible law enforcement and also funding public health resources that supplement law enforcement and make their jobs easier. We need more tools in the toolbox. Not every situation is best handled with handcuffs. We need an inclusive, holistic approach to responding to crises in the 21st century. If someone is overdosing, they need help. Addiction is a disease. And we know that more treatment, more substance abuse counselors not only help solve the problem, they reduce recidivism, reduce crime, keep our communities safer. If someone is experiencing a mental health emergency, sending a trained mental health counselor actually mitigates escalation of the conflict. If someone doesn't have a house and is experiencing housing insecurity, sending a licensed social worker, that's going to connect individuals with the housing support that are going to build them up and make our communities what? Safer. Again, not every situation is best handled with handcuffs. So let's get a bigger toolbox. These additional tools, they're not only necessary, they keep our communities safe. They make our communities safer. And they save lives. I know that this legislation will make a positive impact in my community in Louisville, Kentucky. It will ease the burden on law enforcement officers there as well as across the country, who are not often forced to respond to crisis situations that they are trained to deal with. So let's have an alternative where we can keep our communities safe and keep people safer. This is common sense. And I am proud to stand with my colleague, Cori Bush, and push for accountability and push for safer communities. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, now we'll call up Thea Sebastian, Director of Policy at Civil Rights Corps.
Good afternoon, everyone. Hope that you are avoiding melting right now. So thanks to everyone for being here. What I really want to say is to uplift something that Representative Bush started off with. The People's Response Act is not a bill. What the People's Response Act is an embodiment of the paradigm shift that everyone standing up here right now has been hungry for. For too long, we have made the word safety associated with jails, with prisons, with police officers, with a criminal legal system that has failed to do what we all truly want, to keep our kids safe, our parents safe, our friends safe, our communities safe. And so how would this bill actually start to change things? Well, just starting with this division on community safety that Representative Bush mentioned. What this division would do is literally take the word safety and move it to our largest agency that focuses on public health. That is the paradigm shift that we want. We are making safety what it actually is, which is a matter of public health. And what we know when we look at the evidence is that our most effective interventions for improving life expectancy throughout history have all been investments in clean air, in hygiene and sanitation, in upfront investments in communities and in the services that people need. The same is true for safety, and that is what this bill really centers. That's why my organization, along with more than 70 other organizations, came together around a community safety agenda that would make investments across all the areas that evidence shows us truly do serve to save lives. Those are investments in mentoring, in education, in permanent supportive housing, in streetlights and parks, investments in unarmed crisis responders, in community violence intervention. But for us, the People's Response Act is at the heart of this agenda because it's not only a set of investments, it is a different way of doing business. It is a different way of thinking about what must be the greatest priority that we all have. In a previous life, I was a teacher, and I can tell you that every single day, my greatest ambition was to do what I could just to keep my kids safe, to keep them able to be coming back to school. I couldn't do that in the classroom, which is how I landed here, standing on the halls of Congress and trying to make sure that we can pass the policies that they needed then. So I just want to say thank you so much, not only to the Congress people who are standing behind this bill, but to all the people behind me who are with us in this fight, because I know we are not going to stop until this bill does become the law of the land. Thank you. Oh, sorry. And let me now hand it over to a close partner of ours and fearless organizer, Trevor Wild, who is with the March for Our Lives.
Thank you so much to Congresswoman Bush and her staff for sponsoring this bill and inviting me and the March for Our Lives movement up to Capitol Hill to fight alongside you. As an organizer with March, I fight every day for innovative, holistic, and proactive approaches to preventing gun violence and supporting communities. And that's why I'm so proud, on behalf of our entire movement, to support this legislation. From every corner of the country, I've spoken with students and families, and from what I've heard is that people want a future where we're not just free from gun violence, but where ourselves and our communities can thrive. I've spoken to teachers in St. Louis who are moved to action because they love their kids and their kids deserve the best and safest public schools. I've spoken to community activists here in DC who've channeled Dr. King in his calls for racial justice. I've met with the students in Florida, Texas, and Georgia across the Sun Belt who are fighting back against the defunding of our public institutions, our public schools, and local community organizations. And in all of these conversations, the common thread is that our communities are under attack. Under attack from gun violence at the hands of a militarized police force, from a lack of health care that leaves us in prison cells when we need clinics, from school funding being diverted to new private prisons and police academies, and for far too often and for far too long, our existing and extremely misguided approach to public safety has been devastating and deadly, especially for young people, persons with disabilities, and Black and brown communities. But when our communities are under attack, we join this movement to stand up and fight back. Whether it be the teachers in St. Louis, the organizers here in DC, the students in the Sun Belt, or the people standing right behind me today, we are showing up and fighting back. It's beyond clear that we need a change in this country, and that's exactly what Congresswoman Bush's bill called for. A transformation in public safety into a system of care rather than criminalization, improving the well-being of communities across this country, and most importantly, saving lives. But the truth is, there's a small but organized arm of our country that's hell-bent on controlling us with fear, with policing, with injustice. But just as the generations of movement builders before us have come together and fought for our future, we will come together and continue that fight because we don't have any more time to wait. We need our elected officials to rise up, to stand up and address these problems and disparities, to join us for a future where we feel safe and supported. Representative Bush, I am so proud to have the movement join you in this fight, and believe me, we're going to organize like hell to make sure this legislation is passed. Thank you so much. I'd like to next introduce Shalamaya Bowers of Black Lives Matter.
The first question I have is, does the People's Response Act cool down the weather right now?
It's hot.
It's hot.
It's hot.
It's hot. That's right. That's right. How's everybody doing? Good. My name is Shalomia Bowers, and I'm with Black Lives Matter. And today I stand here honored to be part of the introduction of this critical legislation, the People's Response Act, and humbled by the impacted families who are here with us today advocating for systemic change through policy. We are here on the heels of the 10-year anniversary of the Black Lives Matter movement just last week. One of the things that I asked my team as we reflected on 10 years was if they remembered their first interaction with the movement. And while we have our origin story that is rooted in the deeply frustrating and unjust acquittal of George Zimmerman in the murder of Trayvon Martin, I know for many of us, our fight for liberation started prior to that. For me, this is a surreal moment because in my life, what propelled me into advocacy and why I started my march with Black Lives Matter was the murder of Oscar Grant, whose life was stolen by BART police in 2009. So to be here with Uncle Bobby and Auntie B as we reintroduce legislation that helps to end state-sanctioned and vigilante violence, it is a really powerful moment, and I'm grateful and full. When we say Black Lives Matter, we don't just want lip service. We need to see that our lives matter through members who are willing to introduce legislation like those who are here today, who are proving to us that our lives matter. We need policy changes that change the conditions for Black people around the world. Thank you to Representative Cori Bush for leading the reintroduction of this legislation, and for the members of Congress that are here to assist in that reintroduction. I want to say a few words about Representative Bush because she is special to this movement. Congresswoman Bush is an example of what it means to bring the movement from the streets to the halls of power. And it is rare to have a member of Congress that feels like a relative. But that's because that your leadership is accessible. You make people feel seen, heard, and valued. Whether it be camping out for 5 days, demanding Congress delay their recess in order to extend the eviction moratorium, or challenging the status quo and speaking truth to power in committee meetings, or introducing historic and revolutionary legislation like the People's Response Act, you continue to champion radical and transformative Black policy through the halls of Congress. You are brilliant, and you are a strategic leader, and we love you to the moon and back. Black people are tired of politicians taking their votes and, more importantly, taking their lives for granted. The reason the movement for Black liberation is the largest social justice movement in the history of the United States is because our movement continues to give a voice to folks and an opportunity for people to say, as Mama Fannie Lou Hamer said, "I'm sick and tired of being sick and tired." The People's Response Act is landmark federal legislation inspired by Black organizing and Black lived experiences. The bill is a product of the demands and actions called forth from families directly impacted to upend a law enforcement model that harms our communities. What I really love about this legislative vision is it builds public safety through investment and build a system that actually works. It invests in local communities to uplift effective public safety that centers the needs of marginalized folks. Now it is time for Congress to act and set a precedent for public safety that allows all communities to thrive. The last thing that I'll say is we are going to win liberation.
That's right. That's right.
Because we must.
That's right.
We aren't letting up.
That's right.
Our freedom depends on it. We intend to keep doing the work of rebuilding and reimagining our world, a world where white supremacy and historically anti-Black systems no longer exist.
That's right.
A world where Black people have the necessary resources to thrive and push the boundaries on truly living. A world where Black lives actually do matter. And to make this world a reality, we need to abolish the prison complex and tackle the systems built to tear down Black families and build up systems of care and build up systems of true public safety. This is necessary for our future, for the future of our Black children and their children and the ongoing generations to come. Thank you, and it is with great honor, great honor, that I introduce to you Auntie B. We call her Auntie because, again, she feels like family.
My name is Beatrice X. Johnson, affectionately known as Aunt B. I am the co-founder of Love Not Blood campaign, Families United for Justice, an organization, unfortunately, with a database of over 800 family members who have been impacted by loss of loved ones by police, including my cousin, Gail P. Keaton Smalley, killed by Detroit police in 1972. Also standing with me is Cephas Uncle Bobby X. Johnson, co-founder of Love Not Blood campaign, Families United for Justice, and the uncle of Oscar Grant. I am also the baby sister of Dorothy Jean Dale Chambers, who suffered from mental illness and homelessness. She was struck and killed, along with her partner, Joseph Gutierrez, by Nebraska Pekovic in Phoenix, Arizona on April 26, 2022, as we continue to fight. All these families standing behind me, I wish that they could speak. All these families standing with me today, loved ones suffered from mental illness or were in a mental health crisis when they were killed by police. Say their names.
Right.
The family of Miles Hall, killed in Walnut Creek, California. Say his name.
Miles Hall.
The family of Tenoris Williams, killed in Palm Beach, Florida. Say his name.
Tenoris Williams.
The family of Michelle Crusoe, killed in Phoenix, Arizona. Say her name.
Michelle Crusoe.
The family of Glenn Foster Jr., killed in Carrollton, Alabama. Say his name.
Glenn Foster Jr.
The family of Ronald Green, killed in Farmersville, Louisiana. Say his name.
Ronald Green.
The family of Kevin L. Cooper, killed in Baltimore, Maryland. Say his name.
Kevin L. Cooper.
The family of Corrine Gaines, killed in Randall, Maryland, say her name.
Cori James.
Say her name. Dorothy Jean Dale Chambers, say her name.
Dorothy Jean Dale Chambers.
And that's why we are standing here in support of H.R. 4194, the People's Response Act, to increase qualified professional approaches to community safety, welfare, and save lives, and begin to practice loyalty to humanity. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. So thank you to all of our speakers. Thank you to all of our impacted families, all of our families who are still grieving and hurting, families where this country didn't fix it. But you are holding them accountable, and we will continue to stand with you. We'll open it up. I know we have the griot still. Yes. Hi. Thank you.
How do you think your colleagues on the right are going to receive this?
Yeah, the thing is, our colleagues on the right have an agenda that they are following, and it is not about representing all the people. It is not taking care of those who are the most marginalized in our community. It is not tackling white supremacy. It is not about even acknowledging racism so we can get to the point of a place of equality in this country, let alone talk about equity. And so some of them, if they think, I've learned that if they think that it has something to do with helping out black folks or helping out brown folks, to the point to where maybe it's going to help them disproportionately more, that's oftentimes legislation that they don't want to see, that they don't want to support. That's why it's our work to continue to push it. That's why it's our work to continue to organize. And as we are working with all of the groups and advocates up here, and those who weren't able to be here today, all of the directly impacted families, those that they don't want to hear from, as we continue to do that work, when we are able to be in a position to where we can take back the House and we have the Senate, we can get this through to the president, we'll get what we need. But in the process of that, there is still a lot of on the ground work. So even though the federal government may not be recognizing it, there is work happening in local communities. And so that is what this is about as well. While we're waiting for the federal government to act, when we know that the federal government look, we still waiting on reparations. So that the federal government has a moral and legal obligation to pay. But I won't go into all of that. What this does with us pushing on the federal level, local communities, just like mine in St. Louis, are saying, hey, well, then we'll do it. And they have the data to show, just like the Denver Cahoots program, and then the one in Utah, there's one in Miami-Dade, and in so many other places where they just decided we'll do it ourselves. So that is, and they have been successful, and they have saved lives. And if they're the least that a member of Congress can do is do what our job is, which is write a doggone bill about it, which is talk to our communities and find out what the need is. The least we could do is to write a bill about it while folks have lost loved ones and still don't have the accountability, where they've lost loved ones and still can't even get police reports, where they've lost loved ones and are not even recognized in this country. The least that Cori Bush can do, when I say that I want to represent the people, is put forward legislation that would help them. The least that this nurse that comes from a mental health background, that watched my patients living under bridges, that watched my patients have their medications stripped from them because they were unhoused and the police took their medications, or someone took their medications from them, and now the least that I can do is write legislation to fix it. And with their help, though, I can't do it by myself, and I don't want to do it by myself. I came here to work with movement because I am a part of the movement, so that we can do this together, so that our legacy, our children's children, won't endure what we have.
Thank you.